Greetings, scholars, and welcome to week 2 of EDU 300. This week we want you to get into chapters 1 and 2. Chapter 1 being an introduction to our study, which is somewhat of a review of the intro psychology class you took before. And chapter 2 gives a background in the biological beginnings of life and how we actually got here. Remember that by the end of this week, Saturday night at midnight, reflection number 1 will be due. You need to have that posted to the website. Also, you need to check your mirror results to see if you've had enough people respond for you to get the results that you need. Let me give you a little bit of an overview about what we'll be doing this week in those two areas. The first one is the chapter 1 on introductions gives an overview of theories of development. Theories are systems of beliefs that explain facts and help make predictions. They can't prove things, however, though. Albert Einstein once said that 10,000 experiments cannot prove me right, but one can prove me wrong. So a theory is a person's best guess about how things work that can be tested to determine if it is false. So again, theories can't be proven, but they can have evidence that indicates they're telling you some portion of the truth. On the other hand, a belief is different than a theory. A belief is a premise assumed to be true without being able to adequately prove it. So, for example, do you believe that people are good or people are basically bad? That's a belief system. You could develop a theory to test that out if you wanted to. So anyway, theories are like, I would say it's like a peek into a circus tent. And when I was a young child, they used to have an actual tent that the circus would come to, rather than an arena or a Bank of Kentucky Center or places like that. And as kids, you'd run around and look in the little holes in the tent and try to peek and see what circuses were all about. And some people would come back and say, circuses are about acrobats, or others would say, no, they're about clowns, or others, they're elephants, or horses, or dogs, or animals, or they'd say all kinds of different things. It depended upon the angle at which you looked into the tent. You looked into the big top. Well, the human brain is the same way. In the last 25 to 50 years, we've learned a lot about how the human brain functions through a lot of the brain science research. And we find it's a very complex thing. Just to get a start on it and to be somewhat humorous, we found that there are differences between males and female brains. For example, female brains tend to be oxytocin driven, and that is that they're really they're based around the hormone oxytocin, which is a hormone that's associated with attachment and social bonds and bonding. And so maybe a theory would be that the female brain would look something like this: a need for commitment, lots of things that have to do with communication and listening and being social. Male brains, on the other hand, tend to be more testosterone driven, and this, in fact, there's some evidence of this. Obviously, we're being funny with this one, but testosterone-driven is linked to sexual pursuits and less of the social connection that oxytocin requires. Now, in fact, both brains have both oxytocin hormones and testosterone hormones. Science tells us that the human brain is a kludge, and a kludge is it's a mechanism that has things bolted onto it. And so most brain scientists think that we have really 3 basic parts of our brain. We have something called the central core, sometimes called the reptilian part of our brain. That's the most basic part, that was the first part of the brain to develop during the evolutionary history of life on this of animals on this earth. It's where lust lives, it's where the reflexes are, instincts, your circulation, balance, sleep, fear, all the things that you don't have to really think about at all. They all happen almost automatically. The second part of the brain came somewhat later. It's called the limbic system. It's sometimes called the mammalian brain. And the mammalian brain is where emotions live, attachments, sense of danger, memory, and caring for other living things. Um, you see these kinds of emotions in people, you'll see them in dogs, you'll see them in almost every mammal. So, and research indicates that even for human beings, a significant part of our behavior, 60, 70%, actually comes from the limbic brain, comes from the emotions and attachments and caring kinds of things. And then more recently, when Homo sapiens started inhabiting the earth, we developed a cerebral cortex, and specifically a prefrontal cortex, where thought, logic, planning, consciousness, and maybe even altruism. Altruism meaning doing things good for people, humanity, life, the earth, for no apparent self motivation or self-interest. So, so in this chapter, in the chapter 1 that reviews all the theories that you've probably seen before, some of the major ones would be things like Freudian psychoanalytic theory. You know, Freud thought that the mind had 3 different parts, 3 different voices, if you want, that would talk to you. It has an id, which is the part of you that always wants to seek pleasure and have fun and don't really worry about stuff. The superego is your conscience. It's Jiminy Cricket sitting on your shoulder saying, don't do that, don't do that. And then your ego is the self that you know. It's the one that gets in the tug of war between the id saying, hey, go have fun, and the superego saying, no, you better study instead. And Freud said that there are different stages that people go through. And he thought that most of the important stages happen during the first 12 years of life. He thought relatively little happened after that. And again, if you know Freud, you know that he thought that most of the issues that happen in adult life were caused because of things that happened going through early stages. And most of those were circling around how one dealt with understanding and learning about one's sexuality. Erikson was also a psychoanalytic theorist, and we're going to spend a lot of time in this course talking about Erikson. He thought that it really doesn't stop, growth doesn't really stop, and the stages don't stop at 12 years old, but actually go through an entire person's life. We are organisms that are constantly changing, growing, and developing, and we'll spend a lot of time talking about each of these stages. Most people most psychologists think that there's a lot more weight and value given to this notion of change over the course of a lifetime. And of course our course is called Lifespan Development, so we're going to be looking at that change over that course of time. Everybody has heard about Piaget, the cognitive or constructivist theorist. The main things in Piaget's theory there's a lot of things you learn. Matter of fact, most things in life you learned without really being taught. How did you learn to speak? How did you learn to walk? How did you learn to do so many of the different things that you do? Think, for example. And Piaget thought that we're born with a brain of a scientist. We're always trying to figure things out. And we get to figure things out based on the stages we're in and based on the sophistication of our brain. So he would say we go through a part of our brain functioning where most of it's sensory motor, having to do with touch, feeling, and then we start developing some pre-operational schemes. Then we'll get into concrete operations, learn how to count, tell time, and then somewhere between 13 and 25, researchers find, you'll be in something called a formal operational stage where you can think very complexly about things. Vygotsky's another one. This is the favorite theorist of teachers, so if you're going to be a teacher, this is the one you want to know. If you're going to be a coach, this is the one you probably use the most. He talked about the zone of proximal development. That's figuring out where someone is in terms of their development and what their capabilities are, and then trying to give them tasks to learn that are within their zone, within their range of their ability to learn. Vygotsky was very into having group work and peer teachers. Who better to teach a child, a young person to read than someone just learning how to read themselves? But he was very much interested in also having the appropriate age levels and appropriate learning, what people are able to do at that time. Behavioral theorists, if any of you, I know most of you have dogs. You've used Pavlov a lot. Does the name Pavlov ring a bell? If you've trained a dog, you know that you can teach a dog to react to certain words or phrases by associating it with food. And I do a lot of dog training myself, and fortunately dogs are very food driven, so you can train them to do all kinds of things by associating food with certain things, commands, activities, etc. Skinner, of course, was an operant conditioning person. He believed that in behavior management, and he said that it's really important what happens immediately before and immediately after an event that determines if a person learns. Bandura, social cognitive theorist, he said you can actually learn by observing, and so the importance of modeling will be brought up in that one. Then one that's not in the book that I think is very important is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Maslow says that if you don't have enough food, if you don't feel safe, if you don't feel loved by someone, then it's really almost impossible to start doing higher order things like gaining knowledge, understanding, look at justice, peace, order, symmetry, and then ultimately self-actualizing, getting to see a universe that all fits together. But if you don't have those deficiency needs that have to be provided by someone else, a caring adult, a parent, a teacher, a grandparent, some kind of caring adult, if you don't have those needs met, you can't get on up to the being needs at the top of the pyramid. The ethological theorists, or evolutionary theorists they're called, they say that so much of what we do right now really depends upon our evolutionary history. And again, it's gaining a lot of traction. There's a lot of good research you'll read about in the chapters about that. Konrad Lorenz was the person who you'll read about who had the geese that would follow him. It so happened that there was something called a critical period or imprinting that happened, and the first moving object that a geese or a chicken or a bird would see was associated with the parenting one, the person that they were supposed to follow, and so he would have all the geese following him around. Bowlby, another very critical one on critical periods and attachment. We'll come back to that often in the course, because how you were able to attach with a loving person in the first years of your life is a predeterminer of the kinds of things that will happen to you in your relationships with others the rest of your life. If you were fortunate enough to have a secure attachment to a loving person at the beginning of your life, you're likely to have a much higher possibility of having a secure attachment and long-lasting partner for the rest of your life. Ecological theories, Bronfenbrenner's is the most complex. He said everything from society, culture, religion, schools, the world, the community, your body, all those things come into play to determine the development that you'll go through. And really, coming back to the big top again, most of us become eclectic in our theoretical orientation. We become eclectic in trying to determine how the world works and making theories about the world. All the theories we'll talk about in the course over this semester have what's called a range of convenience. They work for some areas really well, and they don't work in other areas. Some theories explain facts and predict things better than others, and so we use those to have better predictive values. But theories evolve based on research findings, social conditions, and life experiences. In Chapter 2, we're going to talk about biological beginnings. I like to say that after a millennia of preparation, you, the person you are today, started just like that, with the connection of a sperm and an egg and two human beings that then allowed you to develop into the person you are today. This is just a very crude picture I drew. You have what's called parent cells, a female germ cell on the left-hand side, and you'll see that the little A's and big A's and C's and H's and everything are to represent chromosomal pairs. And what happens in the process of meiosis, both in the female germ cell and the male germ cell, is that half of that genetic material, big A goes to one daughter cell, little a goes to the other, and it happens totally randomly. The same thing happens, and by the way, the daughter cell is called an egg. The same thing happens in the male, where you have the male germ cell. It divides into what's called a haploid state, and half of the genetic material from the male germ cell goes into one, and half goes into the other. And for males, depending upon which of the 23rd chromosome you receive, that determines if it's going to be a male or a female. So, just for fun, I calculated this for you. If for a particular sperm and a particular egg that came together, what were the odds that it would be you exactly? Now, other than identical twins who have the exact same genetic makeup, everyone else, all your brothers and your sisters and everyone else in the world have a unique set of chromosomal makeup. So anyway, you'd calculate it very quickly. If you looked at the number of sperm that a different sperm that a father could create, it's actually 2 to the 23rd power. There are 23 chromosomes, so you would multiply 2 times 2 times 2 23 times, and you get 8 million, roughly 8,400,000. Same thing is true with your mother's egg cells. By randomly assigning little a and big A, you come up with 8,400,000 different combinations. So to figure out with that same mother and father, what's the odds of having ones just like you, that would be 2 to the 23rd power squared, or it'd be roughly 64 billion to 1 that your parents, if they continue to have children, would have another one other than identical twins that were exactly the same as you genetically, chromosomally. And then if you looked at all the people in the world, between 5 and 7 billion now, the odds of another person in the world being just like you are 300 trillion to 1. So chances are there's not somebody like you. The chapter is also going to talk about different chromosomal disorders. It's very important to look at those, just to be aware of those things that do happen. You're going to also look about critical periods. This is a very important chapter to read for anyone who is anticipating having children. This chart that you see right here traces the growth of a human being over the course of weeks, from the first week of conception all the way to the last week, 38th week, when you'll have birth. And if you look at the chart, you'll see that different organs and different parts of the body develop in different ways. And the colored portion in the bottom show you the critical periods when things can affect the development of the fetus. So, for example, in the first couple of weeks, if something happens, it's called a spontaneous abortion. And matter of fact, that's what a spontaneous abortion would be if some major defect happens that doesn't allow for survivability. But in the first 7 or 8 weeks, major structural abnormalities can happen depending upon what happens within the uterus. And during the last 38 weeks, you can have physiological defects and minor structural abnormalities. So it's crucial to be very careful and learn a lot about what you should and shouldn't be doing during a time that you're developing a fetus, should you become pregnant. There are lots of tests that are available nowadays. You'll read about those. You'll read about some of the things that affect long-term effects on fetus development. Everything from smoking, of course, alcohol, diet, emotional stress, mother's age, sex of child even. Males tend to be spontaneously aborted much more frequently than females due to the chromosomal makeup of males and females. Any type of drug will have an effect. Everything from diet sodas to taking mega dosages of vitamins to caffeine to saccharin, rubella vaccinations, cough syrups. You have to be very careful again during a time of prenatal development to not expose yourself or the fetus to lots of extraneous teratogens are called. Even things like water quality. You have to be very careful about pesticides, heavy metals, careful about heat, too much caffeine, fish that contains mercury. Those are mainly predator fish, but you can learn all about that in this chapter as well. But the good news is that there are 4 million plus live births in the U.S. every year, and 97% of those come out just fine. And 40% of the birth defects that do happen are actually from known causes, and with enough education and learning and prevention, you can not have those experiences for a child of yours. There are some that aren't, but 40% of them is a big number. You can make a big difference. Well, if you've not, I have 3 links here for you, and by the way, this PowerPoint is on the week 2. If you look at the bottom of your week 2, when you click on it, you'll see materials and PowerPoints, and this PowerPoint is there. And I would encourage you to watch these videos. If you've never seen a live childbirth, the middle one of these shows you a live childbirth, and it's something that you shouldn't be a college student without having seen, at least on video. And if you're fortunate to be there in person, it's all part of nature, and go ahead and observe those. The other 2 are just kind of for fun. So that's week 2. You'll find all these things in the PowerPoint slide. You can click on these in the week 2 materials and PowerPoint folder. So get going, get into Learn Smart, go through all the assignments, and again, if you get 100%, it takes a little about an hour to go through each chapter. If you get 100%, you'll have earned your 6 points for each of those chapters to be added to your grade. Okie dokie. Talk to you again next week.